been writing about this solidly since this crisis broke, so my head is buzzing with this stuff. And I felt I didn't need to write anything down. Secondly, I didn't write anything because it seems to me every day there's some new revelation, some new angle that shifts my thinking a bit. So I'm very unsettled still, I think, about how I interpret what is happening. So I'm going to kind of take the easy way out, really, and stand back a bit and try and look at the big picture. And I think to some extent this will mean that I'm going to respond to the two questions that you left us with. I'd like to start, though, by echoing something that Kerem said, which I think is very important, which is how much different a place Turkey now is. And I want to say that because everything I'm about to say might seem to suggest I hadn't noticed. I first went to Turkey, I think it was in the early 70s. It's a profoundly noisy, diverse, sophisticated, complicated, argumentative, mobilized, affluent, productive society now than it was then. And I think we have to bear that in mind because it'll feed into something I'll kind of finish up with, which is the relationship between society and politics in Turkey. It is a profoundly changed society and economy and everything. So we have this crisis, you've heard about it. What immediately might happen? It's hard to see how the AK Party can lose any of the elections coming up. So therefore it seems to me what is interesting, or maybe not therefore, what is interesting though, is the relationship between President Gül and Prime Minister Erdogan. The only challenge on the assumption that the AK Party is going to win certainly the local elections and possibly the elections after that, presidential and parliamentary. The only challenge to Erdogan really is going to come from Gül. And he's a very difficult guy to read. He's got a couple of opportunities coming up. One is, will he veto the internet bill and the judicial reform bill that will put higher judiciary under the Justice Minister? He seems to have shaped up on that second issue to say this is a constitutional, not a legal amendment issue. It has to be sorted out by political consensus, not by a majority vote in the Parliament, which looks like he might be shaping up to veto it. If he does, this will be quite a dramatic challenge. Same goes for the internet law. Gül is making all the right noises. Right in the sense of, he looks like he understands the challenge to democracy that this legislation in draft form poses. Will he veto it? I don't know. But I think it's a really important issue how he behaves. I also think what's going to be interesting is how the local elections go. Will the AK Party, will the Turkish electorate start to see Erdogan as much as an electoral liability or problem as an asset or advantage? If Gül sees a weakness in the AK Party's performance and can credibly blame that on Erdogan and Erdogan's behaviour, he might be encouraged to step forward and challenge Erdogan. This would mean, most people say, that Gül becomes Prime Minister. Erdogan, if he really wishes it, can become President, but much more a figurehead President, not the kind of President that Erdogan would like to be. If Gül pulls that off, that he becomes Prime Minister and Erdogan becomes President, but not under new presidential laws, that won't stop Gül's problem. Because Erdogan will behave like a presidential president, whether he has the constitutional powers or not. So Gül, if he challenges Erdogan, is probably going to fight for a long period of time. If he thinks about it, though, an Erdogan that has become a little bit discredited, is now a president without real powers, could easily start to look like a fool. He could look like someone who rants and raves but can't do anything. Gül, with his sweet reasonableness, might actually win the day. So I think, as the immediate issue, the elections, Gül's behaviour, does he veto the legislation? What steps does he make? I think are really interesting issues. Medium term, obviously this gets ever more complicated and ever more speculative, but medium term, what has the AK Party's popularity been based on? Initially, certainly, but I think this legacy still hangs around in the minds of the electorate. The ACT Party presented itself as a clean and honest alternative to the parties that it replaced, that it defeated. Clearly, that can no longer be the case. The mud is going to stick, quite rightly so, I think. What percentage of the electorate is going to say, I voted for them before because they're honest, now they're not, I won't vote for them? We don't know, but I can't help feeling that some part of the ACT Party support, and it could be a substantial part, is going to be deeply upset about the ACT Party's performance and the way that it's been revealed. Also the economy. In many ways the ACT Party governments have walked on water. Everything's gone right for them, most especially the economy. We're probably now about to enter a really difficult period for the Turkish economy, so people are going to start feeling vulnerable again, losing their jobs, there's going to be inflation, and all the rest of it, decline in investment, and so on. That also will mean people will start to wonder about whether the ACT Party is quite the party that it once was. And something we need to think about, this, don't take this as a prediction, but you can say two things about political parties. One of them is in Turkey, which is they tend to fragment and break up at some point. Outside of the change bit, most of them have disappeared. I mean, often that's been through external pressures, military coups, but it also happens for internal reasons. To do with the nature of political parties in Turkey, the nature of the culture. But also parties break up generally in democracies when they are one-party states. I mean, you could even say the reaction against Thatcher was a reaction by her own party against an excess of power by that leader. So something we might have to ask ourselves medium term is, what is the future of the ACT Party? Will Gül, or if not Gül, I don't know who else it might be, Şimşek, I don't know, somebody else, come along and say, I'm going to go marching off and oppose Erdogan, even if it means the party splits. And I think we ought to entertain that thought. If the ACT Party continues to be the main political party, because nobody else is credible, but that a lot of its own supporters are aggrieved, it might be that that gives people courage to break away from the ACT Party and form new coalitions. So it's something I think we need to think about. Longer term, one aspect of the longer term is the Gulen movement. Are we in a battle, are we in a war between the ACT Party and the Hizmet? And whichever it is, does it matter? Because it seems to me that something like the Hizmet, the Gulen movement, can't easily fade away. I mean, the Brotherhoods in Turkey didn't fade away under that whole secular period, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. The Gulen movement is not going to fade away. So in some form or another, it's going to survive. And a lot is going to depend on how it behaves. Whether next time round it starts to say things, maybe not like penetrating institutions, if that's what we've been doing, but saying, actually, we really do mean what we say about the rule of law and democratisation and so on. Will the Gulen movement, which I think will survive, if you like, change its behaviour and start to behave in accordance with what it effectively Gulen at least has preached? Also, you have in Turkey an established now and large-scale, and it isn't about the shift, secular, modern population, which is partly the Hizmet generation, but it's far more than that. So whatever form political Islam, not political Islam in the sense of whatever form Islam is expressed politically in Turkey takes, there's going to be a big chunk of the population that's not going to be happy with that at all. So this idea that in Turkey everything has to be polarised, which does seem to be the idea, is going to be really difficult unless one or both or all parts of the political spectrum start to shift. And it might be that Turkey is now receiving a shock and recognising that maybe people have to think differently about how politics is conducted when people in society are in different places in terms of how they think about politics. Can they be more tolerant and so on and so forth? And then back to a more dramatic point about the military. I don't know if the military yet can talk. And the reason I say that is because what's quite clear is that it's been impossible to challenge the ACT Party with this electoral support, with the economic performance and all the rest of it. If we return to fragmented parties, political weakness in government, obvious corruption, disaffection, possibly violence on the streets, the Constitution hasn't particularly changed in its relationship to the military, and even if it had, if you look at the events of the recent weeks, months and years. The question is, what if it had? Has anybody taken notice of laws and constitutions in Turkey when they behave politically? So I wouldn't rule out that the military might, in and of itself, because of its own self-image, and also with the sympathy and support of chunks of the population, find itself stepping back in where it sees either a vacuum or chaos. So I think, again, we need to think about that. A couple of final points. One is, it seems to me, society and politics in Turkey, I probably have more faith in the Turkish electorate, taken as a whole, than in the Turkish political system, which does lead me to the question whether, if that's true, some people might question it, I question it myself sometimes, but if it's true, if Turkish society is becoming tired of the way politics is conducted, whichever side of the fence it's on, can a political system continue to behave in what is still, formally a democracy, in ways that simply don't respond to societal changes, societal need? Complicated, complex, diverse society is going to want a political system that reflects that complexity. Now, all sorts of things about tolerance, rule of law and stuff have to be introduced. But it does look to me hard to imagine how an ever more complicated society can be represented by a return to the sort of autocratic, centralised government that Turkey has been associated with in the past. It might be really difficult to bring that off. And final point, despite everything I've said, or maybe because of everything I've said, I've been looking at Turkey now for about 14 years, I suppose 15 years, when I got interested in actually writing about Turkish politics. I used to be optimistic. I used to buy into the whole idea that Turkey had a mission and it was to become more a modern country. I was also optimistic about the AK Party when it first came to power. I used to buy into what a lot of people describe as the meta, the generous remarks, 2 steps forward, 1 back. That's just the way Turkey behaves, but at least it moves forward. Then I thought, no, there's too much of a pattern there. It's 5 forward, 1 back, and 2 forward, 4 back. But on balance, it's still progress. Right now, I'm feeling very pessimistic. Right now, I'm looking at everything I see, and I think, oh, this is worse than it was actually when I first started to take a closer interest in Turkish politics. And it is a question that has to be asked about the long term. This is a country that goes right all the way back to 1923, set itself on this modernising path. That, if you like, since 1963, has aligned itself with the EU and set that as the aspiration. And after all of those years, all of those decades, all of the changes in Turkish society, politics is still conducted in the way we're seeing it being conducted today. And I sometimes, in really pessimistic moments, and I'm having a lot of them at the moment, wonder whether in real political culture terms any progress has been made at all. I hope that's a transitory, momentary thought, but it is kind of where I am at the moment. I'm looking around for progress and feeling quite pessimistic. Still there.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, now before I open it to the floor, I abuse my power as the chairman and moderator of this session and ask the first question, if you don't mind, to the panel. And that is actually on the very, pessimistic note, I would say, let me turn this whole thing around. And this question would go to all three. And use Kerem's question that he asked about the end of democracy and turn it around and say, is this not potentially the start of Turkish democracy? And if you don't mind, with that, going a bit into the potential for thinking for